Right now, at this very moment, 3 million people are walking around with tiny computers inside their chests. These devices are monitoring every heartbeat, making split-second decisions, and keeping these people alive. Without them, every one of those 3 million people would be dead within weeks. The device fits in the palm of your hand and weighs less than a deck of cards. It runs on a battery that lasts 20 years. And it all started with one man grabbing the wrong resistor from a box in his garage workshop in Buffalo, New York. That mistake, that single wrong component, became the most important medical accident in human history. This is the story of the pacemaker. And trust me, this is a story worth telling. Before 1958, if your heart stopped beating properly, that was it. Game over. Complete heart block, they called it. Your heart's natural electrical system would fail, and your heartbeat would slow to a crawl or become dangerously irregular. Doctors had a name for what happened next. They called it sudden cardiac death, and there was absolutely nothing they could do about it. Patients would come into emergency rooms, conscious but dying, their hearts beating maybe 30 times per minute instead of the normal 70. Not enough to keep their brains supplied with oxygen. Not enough to keep them alive? The lucky ones might last a few weeks. Most died within days. Dr. Paul Zoll changed that in 1952 with the first external pacemaker. But calling it a solution was generous. His machine required electrical shocks of 100 to 150 volts delivered directly through the chest wall. Imagine being struck by lightning once every second, all day long. The pain was so excruciating that patients required continuous sedation. The electrical burns were severe. And you had to stay connected to a machine the size of a refrigerator, tethered to the wall by thick cables. It kept you alive, barely. But it was not living. Think about that for a second. In 1957, heart disease was already the leading killer in America. But if you had the specific type of heart failure called complete heart block, you did not get months or years to fight it. You got days, maybe weeks if you were willing to be tortured by Dr. Zoll's electric shock machine. That was the world Wilson Greatbatch was trying to change from his little workshop behind his house in Buffalo. Wilson Greatbatch was 37 years old, father of 5, and already held 325 patents. He made his living in a workshop behind his house, building small electronic devices and selling them to local companies. Not exactly the profile of someone about to revolutionize medicine. But Greatbatch had attended a medical conference where he learned about heart block. And unlike most engineers, he did not see an electronic problem. He saw human suffering that electronics might solve. In May of 1958, he was working on a heart rhythm recorder. Not a pacemaker, just a device that could monitor and record heartbeats for doctors to study later. He reached into his parts box and grabbed what he thought was a 10 kilo-ohm resistor. Standard component. Nothing special, but his fingers found the wrong resistor. A 1 megohm resistor. 100 times the resistance he needed. Any other engineer would have immediately noticed the mistake, thrown out the circuit, and started over. But when Greatbatch powered up his device, something magical happened. Instead of continuously recording, the circuit pulsed. Once per second. Exactly once per second. He stared at the oscilloscope display, watching the steady rhythmic pulse. And then it hit him. This was not a mistake. This was a heartbeat. A perfect electronic heartbeat. Greatbatch later said, "I stared at the thing in disbelief, then realized this was exactly what was needed to drive a heart." Here is where it gets really interesting. Most great inventions come from years of careful research and development. The pacemaker came from grabbing the wrong part from a box. But recognizing that the mistake was actually the solution? That took genius. Within 3 weeks, working 12-hour days in his garage, Greatbatch had built the first implantable pacemaker prototype. It was the size of a hockey puck, weighed several ounces, and was powered by mercury batteries. Crude by today's standards, but revolutionary for its time. It could theoretically run for 4 years on a single set of batteries. More importantly, it was small enough to be implanted inside a human chest. Greatbatch needed a doctor willing to take an enormous risk. He found Dr. William Chardack, chief of surgery at Buffalo Veterans Hospital. Chardack had been watching his heart block patients die for years, powerless to save them. When Greatbatch showed up with his hockey puck-sized device, Chardack's response was simple. If it works, we'll save lives. If it doesn't, we haven't lost anything. On July 7, 1958, they performed the first test, not on a human, on a dog in the hospital's experimental laboratory. Greatbatch, Chardack, and surgical resident Dr. Andrew Gage gathered around the operating table. They implanted the device and connected it to the dog's heart. Then came the moment of truth. They turned it on. The heart monitor immediately showed a steady, regular rhythm. The pacemaker was working. For 4 hours, that dog's heart beat in perfect rhythm, controlled entirely by Greatbatch's accidental invention. When they finally euthanized the animal for autopsy, they found no damage, no rejection, no problems. Just a heart that had been beating normally thanks to electronic pulses from a device smaller than a smartphone. But here was the problem. American hospitals were too cautious to approve human trials. The device had worked perfectly in animals, but the legal and ethical hurdles seemed impossible. So the first human to receive an implantable pacemaker was not in Buffalo, New York. It was in Stockholm, Sweden. On June 6, 1960, Henning Elmqvist, a 43-year-old Swedish man with complete heart block, became the first human to receive an implantable pacemaker at the Karolinska Institute. The surgery was successful. For the first time in medical history, a human being was walking around with an artificial heartbeat keeping them alive. There was just one problem. The first device failed after 3 hours. The second device, implanted immediately, lasted 2 days. The third one worked for 3 months. But it did not matter. They had proven it could be done. And that was enough. Earl Bakken saw the future before anyone else did. He was the founder of a small medical device company in Minneapolis called Medtronic. In 1960, when most people still thought pacemakers were experimental curiosities, Bakken paid Wilson Greatbatch $8 million for the manufacturing rights. $8 million. For a company that had only $180,000 in annual sales. That purchase transformed Medtronic from a tiny repair shop into a medical device giant. And nobody had any idea what they had just started. By 1965, something remarkable was happening in hospitals across America and Europe. Entire new medical specialties were being created around the pacemaker. Electrophysiology, cardiac surgery centers, specialized training programs. The Cleveland Clinic, Mayo Clinic, and dozens of other hospitals established dedicated pacemaker programs. Hundreds of surgeons learned the new techniques. But the real revolution was in the engineering. Between 1958 and 1972, pacemakers shrank from hockey puck size to smaller than a deck of cards. Battery life went from 18 months to over 10 years thanks to lithium battery technology. By the early 1970s, pacemaker implantation could be done as an outpatient procedure under local anesthetic. What had once required major surgery and weeks of recovery now took an hour and sent patients home the same day. When you have been around long enough, you start to see how everything connects. The pacemaker did not just save individual lives. It created an entire ecosystem. By 1980, the global pacemaker market was worth $500 million annually. Over 100,000 devices were being implanted every year. Companies like Medtronic, Boston Scientific, and Abbott became billion-dollar corporations primarily through pacemaker sales. The success created what became known as the medical device corridor in Minneapolis. But that is not even the most interesting part. The pacemaker's success led directly to implantable defibrillators, artificial hearts, insulin pumps, and dozens of other life-saving devices. Every implantable medical device in use today traces its lineage back to that wrong resistor Wilson Greatbatch pulled from his parts box in 1958. Today, Wilson Greatbatch's accidental invention is essentially a computer living inside someone's chest. Modern pacemakers can detect when you are climbing stairs and automatically increase your heart rate. They store months of cardiac data and transmit it wirelessly to your doctor's smartphone. They can tell the difference between normal physical activity and a medical emergency. Some can even shock your heart back to life if it stops completely. But here's the number that puts it all in perspective. As of 2024, over 3 million people worldwide are alive because of implanted pacemakers. 3 million people who would have died within weeks of their diagnosis just 66 years ago. 600,000 new pacemakers are implanted every year. The procedure has a success rate of over 99%, making it one of the safest and most effective surgeries in all of medicine. I still remember the first time I saw one of these in action. A friend of mine had just received his pacemaker and brought up the smartphone app that showed his real-time heart data. There it was, his heart beating steadily at 72 beats per minute, controlled by a device smaller than a matchbook. Technology that would have seemed like magic in 1958, now routine enough that most people forget they have it. Wilson Greatbatch lived to see all of this. He died in 2011 at age 92, having witnessed his accidental discovery save millions of lives and generate over $100 billion in medical device sales worldwide. He continued inventing until his death, ultimately holding over 350 patents. But none of his other inventions came close to the impact of that wrong resistor. And this is the pattern I keep seeing with great inventions. They solve one problem and create an entirely new world. Greatbatch was trying to build a heart rhythm recorder. He ended up creating the entire field of implantable medical devices. That is the thing about innovation. The biggest breakthroughs often come from the most unexpected places. A mistake becomes a miracle. An accident changes everything. So what invention should I cover next? Let me know in the comments below. And if stories like these fascinate you, subscribe and join me every week as we explore more of the moments that changed our world. Remember, this video is for educational purposes only. Always do your own research. Until next time, this is Arthur Lee reminding you that sometimes the most important discoveries come from grabbing the wrong thing at exactly the right moment.